Jay is a very close friend of mine since my early college days. In 2006, he moved to a nearby city to work as a director of photography for a large advertising agency. The following events took place a little over a month after he moved into his new house, when he called me very early one morning to ask me a technical question. To clarify, I've always been my friend's go-to guy for everything that blinks and beeps, so the subject of his call wasn't odd, but the time was. His question was about installing surveillance cameras in his house, so when I asked him what it's about, he mumbled about being fed up and going insane, and then abruptly said, "You know what? Never mind. I'll call you later," and hung up. Not having had my coffee yet, it was hard for me to process what he'd just said, so I got up, had my fix, and called him back. He was reluctant to share with me why he wanted to install cameras inside his small house, but I told him I'd help him out anyway. I sent him a few links of some wireless cameras that day, and explained in my email how easy it was to install and configure them. He called me back later, and said it was too much of a hassle and to just forget about it. I insisted that he tell me what it was that made him consider the idea in the first place. "Did someone break into your house?" I asked. "No, I don't know," he replied in confusion. I told him that if he has any shred of doubt, then it was only logical that he upped his home security and even considered installing an alarm system and a couple of motion sensors as well. I urged him to order the cameras and let me know how it goes. Not hearing back from him a couple of days later, I called him just to see how things went. He got the cameras I suggested, but he gave up after trying for 2 hours to get them working and didn't want to bother me with the whole thing anymore. Although he lived a 3-hour drive away, I told him I'd drive up to his place the coming weekend and get them all set up. I arrived at Jay's place early Saturday afternoon. He lived in an old and narrow 2-story house, snug between 2 buildings. It was vertically divided into 2 equal and symmetrical units, with their doors standing side by side. The house on the right was Jay's, and in the one on the left lived his landlord with his elderly mother. Upon entering Jay's house, you're faced with stairs and a hallway that leads to a bedroom and a rather large bathroom. On the right is a living area connected to a small open kitchen. The upper floor has 2 other bedrooms, but no bathroom. All in all, it was a charming and cozy house in a relatively safe neighborhood, and apparently quite a catch. There were 2 girls in their late 20s living there as well, whom he knew from work, and they were nice enough to let him stay with them for 2 weeks before they moved out when their lease was up. He gave me the tour of the house that was so old that the floorboards creaked whenever his neighbors next door walked around, and the windows whistled at the slightest breeze. The wall that separates the 2 houses was so thin, he could hear the middle-aged landlord quarreling with his mother as if they were sitting with him in the room. He showed me his bedroom on the upper floor, and was complaining that he had to go downstairs every time he needed to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I asked him then, why not move to the bedroom downstairs that not only had the bathroom right next to it, but was also much bigger and had been vacant for more than 3 weeks now. And that's when he paused, and started telling me of an odd series of occurrences that defied explanation. The first time he noticed these events was when he found that some of his things had been moved around the house. At first, he thought it was one of his roommates, but once they left, he blamed himself for being absent-minded. But when one day he looked everywhere in his room for his shoes, he later found them downstairs by the entrance door, and after that he started to pay closer attention. He would get home after work and find an open drawer in the kitchen, the TV unplugged, or wake up in the morning and find one of the couch cushions on the kitchen stool, or one of his coffee table books by the windowsill. Nothing went missing, though, and although he changed the locks the day the girls moved out, he went and changed them again, but that still didn't stop the events. The whole thing didn't disturb him much, until the soap incident. His previous roommates had left behind a bar of soap, the smell of which he couldn't stand, so he chucked it in the medicine cabinet and got a new liquid soap dispenser that didn't smell quite so girly and herbal. The next morning, to his astonishment, he found the bar of soap back in the soap holder and the liquid soap by the bathtub. He was baffled. He thought he was losing his mind. What made him freak out, though, is the night before he called me very early when he went downstairs to the bathroom around 2 a.m. Although he's a man's man, he admitted that at night he likes to take a leak while sitting down. He also keeps the bathroom lights off so as not to disrupt his sleepiness and to be able to go back to sleep quicker. I chuckled, but he went on to say that as he was reaching for the toilet seat in the dark, he noticed that it was already down. He didn't think too much of it, but as soon as he sat down, he jolted back up to his feet because the toilet seat was still warm. He quickly turned on the light and took a frantic look around, but couldn't find anyone. He then noticed that the toilet wasn't flushed. He stood there, terrified. Was it him? If it was him, then why couldn't he remember? And how come the seat was still warm on such an extremely cold night? He couldn't sleep at all that night. He sat in bed, wondering if he was losing it. He was contemplating breaking the lease and moving out, but he really liked the place, which was very affordable, and given his very tight work schedule, it was too much of a hassle to start looking again for another decent house in a city he didn't know very well. Besides, he thought there must be a rational explanation to all of this, and he could probably figure out what was happening if he just had these surveillance cameras. He waited until it was decent enough in the morning and called me. I was attentively listening to him, recounting all these spooky events, and I was now even more determined to install those cameras and get to the bottom of it. But he just kept refusing. "It's one of three things," he said. "It's either me, some paranormal stuff, or an intruder. In either case, I'd rather not find out. Just the thought of catching something on camera terrorizes me to the core." Not wanting to be pushy, I suggested, how about we install them outside the house instead? We set up one camera over his front door facing the street, and another outside his bedroom window facing the backyard. This way, if anyone happened to be getting into the house from either side, we'd have a clear view of their point of entry. We also did a full round of the house, and made sure all windows and doors were locked and secure. I left Jay's house feeling frustrated for not having resolved this chilling enigma. I was anxious for a whole week, talking to him every day to make sure he was okay and things weren't escalating. Stuff was still moving around, cabinets opening, lights being turned on, but somehow he managed to ignore it. He emailed me each day's camera recordings, as he was still unwilling to watch them. I painstakingly examined each one, hoping to catch something, but all I ever saw was Jay going about his daily routine. About a couple of weeks later, I got a call from him early in the morning as I was getting ready for work. "Is everything okay?" I asked anxiously. "Yeah, I'm fine, but you won't believe what just happened," he said in a rather collected tone. "Tell me now, what is it?" "I'll have to see you to tell you, so come by tomorrow," he calmly replied. Although I had plans the next day, I postponed them. Jay greeted me with a rather big smile as I arrived to his place the next day. "So, did you find out what it was? What is it?" I pestered him. "Sit down," he said. "You need to be sitting down to hear this." I sat on the edge of the couch, all eyes and ears, as he recounted the chilling events. At the break of dawn the previous day, he woke up to the sound of footsteps and the wooden floor squeaking. It wasn't unusual, but it was suddenly followed by a loud yell. "I know you got her flowers on Valentine's!" It was the voice of the old lady next door, but the first thing that crossed Jay's mind was that we're still in October, so why is she badgering her son about Valentine's, and at this god-awful hour as well? "Go ahead, pretend you're sleeping, you useless piece of shit," she continued shouting. "I'm tired of your shit. I can't take it anymore." But the odd thing was, she wasn't getting any response, only silence from the other side of this heated conversation. Jay covered his head as he tried to muffle the sound of his neighbors quarreling at this very unusual hour. Then the footsteps grew louder, when he suddenly got startled by her ear-piercing voice, screaming. He was now fully awake and fed up. He pushed the cover aside to get up, when he suddenly saw her old figure with an enraged face, standing over his bed. He was terrified and dumbfounded. She was in his room, talking to him. Before he could get his thoughts together, he heard her son's voice from downstairs shouting, "Ma, come back down!" He sat frozen in bed while he watched the creepy old lady, barefoot and in her sleeping gown, slowly turn around and walk out of his room. He was relieved for a second, until he realized these strangers were in his house. He quickly got up and ran after them. As he rushed down the stairs, he glanced at the front door, but to his astonishment, it was still locked. He then heard a racket coming from the closet under the stairs. He quickly opened the closet door, turned on the light, and took a step back. Nobody was there. One of his camera tripods was on the floor, but everything else was exactly as he had left it. While looking around in the tiny closet, he noticed a sliver of light through a hair-thin crack between two boards of the paneled wall in front of him. He hesitantly stepped inside to take a closer look, and saw some movement through the crack while hearing his intruder's dampened voices from behind the wall, now in their house. Convinced one of the panels was a trap door, he pushed and pressed, but it wasn't budging. He ran outside, angrily pounding on his neighbor's door. The guy unlocked his door, cracked it open, and looked at him in silence. "What were you doing in my house? How the fuck did you get in there?" Jay furiously asked. The man frowned at him and put on a confused look. "Look, I saw you in my house. Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about," Jay yelled, but the man kept on his act, pretending to be oblivious to what was happening. "Listen, you either tell me right now what you were doing in my house and how you got there, or else I'm calling the cops. I have you both on camera," Jay exclaimed while pointing at the camera over his front door. The man peeked out and was surprised when he saw it. He then stepped out and stammered, "Hey, let's not make a big deal out of this. My mother's a very old woman and has Alzheimer's and—" But when Jay firmly demanded to know what was going on, the creepy landlord confessed. It turned out the house where Jay was staying used to be the guy's childhood home. His father used to cheat on his mother all the time, and one of his mistresses was their neighbor, whom they rented the house next door. His father used to sneak into her place at night from the closet under the stairs through this secret door. The creep didn't know if the door was already there or if his father built it, but he found out about it one night when he caught his old man sneaking through and followed him. When his father eventually left, they switched houses because the other house was much better maintained and had a bathroom on the upper floor. Then a few years ago, his mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and kept wandering in the next-door tenant's house through the backyard door, convinced it was her own. The creep claims that his mother discovered the trapdoor recently and that he caught her only once before wandering into Jay's house at night. Jay and I debated the whole story, but we weren't convinced that the old lady could have discovered such a well-hidden door by herself. We believe the guy had been sneaking into the house to peep on the girls who were living there before, and God knows who before them. His mother must have discovered it while he was on one of his nightly sneaks. So Crazy Jay told his landlord that he's willing to let it pass and not call the cops on two conditions: remove the trapdoor or board it shut for good, and cut the rent in half. The guy happily obliged, and Jay never had any more incidents for the entire time he lived there. He moved back home 2 years later, but before he left, he warned the new family that was moving in about the boarded trapdoor and advised them to keep an eye on it and always make sure they lock the closet door. So first of all, I only discovered this subreddit today, which reminded me of something that happened to me in 2008. This was a huge thing to my friends and family, and I didn't really talk about it back then, as it scared the fuck out of me. But it was a while ago, and really is a well-known creepy story among myself and my friends and family. I think I may as well share it, as it's admittedly pretty terrifying. I was living with my parents and sister in Brisbane, Australia at the time, 2008, which means I was 19 years old. I remember my dad had just got Foxtel, cable TV in Australia, but only the TV in the lounge room could use the cable box, and I really wanted to somehow get the cable in my room without paying $99 or whatever for a brand new box. Dad one day went out and bought an AV transmitter/receiver. It was basically a two-piece bit of hardware where you would plug in this tiny box into the cable TV in the lounge room, and it would transmit a video signal to the receiver connected to the TV in my room. So one Saturday, I decided to connect it. My younger sister, 16 at the time, was the only other person home, upstairs in her room. My room was downstairs. I opened the box and connected it up. At first, I was going back and forth trying to get the cables right, trying to get the channel right, etc. But no luck, until I finally found something. I remember just sitting there and something started fuzzing in. This is where things start to feel like a horror movie. I remember thinking, oh, here we go, and waiting to see the picture come in clearly. As it started fuzzing in, I remembered that this whole time, the cable set-top box wasn't even on, and that's why it wasn't working this entire time. But then, why was I getting a signal? It seemed to hit me all at once. As soon as I realized the box was off, the picture fuzzed in, and I saw a bed. I freaked the fuck out, as at first I thought it was my bed. I'd recently seen Saw 2, and remembered that scene where she turns on the TV, and a camera is filming her in her apartment. That was the first thing I thought of. I sprinted upstairs to my sister, absolutely terrified. I told her to come down and take a look. She came down, and we both quickly realized it wasn't my bed. We didn't know whose bed it was, or how I was even getting this signal. Obviously, it was the AV receiver, picking up a camera signal, but we were so confused as to who or what it was for. Eventually, my parents came home, and we concluded that it would have to be a neighbor, or someone living close by, for us to be receiving the signal at all. We waited until around 6 p.m., and then someone came into the room. My dad immediately recognized it as one of our neighbors. We still didn't know what the camera was for, but we assumed it had something to do with fidelity. Either his wife or he had set it up to watch the other and see if they were cheating. Either this or it was to tape themselves having sex. We entertained the idea that he was a murderer and would film himself murdering people in his room, but just to freak each other out. We'd always make jokes about how one night we'll turn it on, and it'll just be his face with clown makeup on, staring at the camera and waving, then him walking out of the bedroom with a knife or something. This never happened, but what did happen was still very creepy. We connected to this signal for over a week, but after a few days the novelty kinda wore off. We felt a bit weird watching it, and just resigned to the explanation that it was to catch his wife cheating, until one day we turned it on, and realized just what we had discovered. Our neighbors were having a bunch of renovations done to their house. During weekdays they would be out, and there would be workers at the place pretty much all day. It had been like this for over a month. We started watching the feed, and saw a man walk into their room. It was the plumber that had been there regularly for the renovations. We didn't think anything of it, until he started opening drawers. I called out to my mom, the only person home at the time, and we started watching it. He started getting the wife's underpants and sniffing them, doing all kinds of creepy shit. At first, we were like, oh my god, how embarrassing. He's being filmed. Will the neighbors see this somehow? But then what happened next was truly terrifying. He slowly walked over to the camera and looked right down at the lens. We were convinced somehow he knew we were watching. Mom immediately called Dad. I kept watching, though. He started fiddling with it and then put it back down. I told Mom that I don't think he knew we were watching, but he was definitely the guy that had placed that camera there in the first place. Dad came home, and by this time the plumber had already left. Much to Mom's pleading, Dad walked over to the neighbors to tell them what we had seen. Mom wanted to completely stay out of it and was terrified, understandably so. When we told the neighbors, they had no idea what we were talking about. They allowed Dad to go up to their room, and what he found that was holding the camera was an installed device in the wall that was designed to monitor water usage. This was completely normal at the time, as Brisbane had been hit with a drought recently, and there were lots of water restrictions. Still are now, I think. The plumber had installed this into the wall, but had fixed a camera behind it, in the wall, to watch the bed. Immediately they called the police, who came over and conducted a thorough investigation. For the next week or so, we didn't hear much about it. I spent most of this time just telling my friends, showing them pictures, but truthfully, my whole family was scared every night. It was just very creepy, thinking that we could have stuff like that just hidden in our house. Chances are we didn't, but it was still a scary thought. After a couple of weeks, my mom was speaking to the wife next door, and asked what happened with it all. The wife said the police found out he would at nights come to our street and sit in his car, which had tinted windows, and just watch them on his laptop. When Mom told me this, I got the biggest shivers. The reason was, besides the obvious of a creepy dude sitting in his car watching people through a hidden camera, was because on multiple nights, when I had driven home late from my girlfriend's or walked home drunk after a night out, I remember seeing a station wagon always about 30 meters down the street from our house. It was never there during the day, always only at night. I'd always walk past it and look at my reflection in the windows, assuming no one was inside. I was always so confused by whose car it was, but I literally never thought it was anything. It still scares me so much that it was just this creepy plumber sitting back there on a laptop watching a hidden camera stream of my neighbors. Anyway, that's my story. It's all true, and it creeps me out to this day, but my friends and I have a good laugh about it every now and then. I grew up with anxiety, fearing the worst in every situation. It's the reason why my sister did not initially believe me, but once she saw for herself, her screams woke my whole household. I was 13, just home from drama practice for the school play. My friend's mom dropped me off. It was pretty late, well after 10 p.m. on a spring night. After kissing my sleeping mother goodnight, I chatted with my father, who was watching TV in the living room. In typical fashion, I took a shower in the upstairs bathroom of our 2-story suburban home in Long Island, New York. After wrapping a towel around myself, I walked across the hall to my sister's room. Her room was in the front of the house, with a window facing the street and another that faces the neighbor's backyard. Both windows had the slotted white blinds drawn, letting a glow from the street lamps into the room. I was sitting on the foot of her bed, which was next to the window that faced the neighbor's house. The lights were off. She was watching TV, and we were just chatting about nothing. That was when I noticed a shadow in the window next to her bed. "Gina, what's that in the window?" I asked calmly. "What? It's probably just a shadow from the TV," she responded, keeping her focus on that late-night episode of Friends. As I was always thinking I'd heard some creepy noise or other, her flippant answer wasn't exactly a shock. But still, the shadow was there. I had to investigate, and at this time, I was both nervous and cautious. I got up, holding my towel with one hand, and approached the window. I asked my sister to turn on the light. What I saw confused me even more. "Hey, it's a camera," I stated. "What?" my sister asked, drawing her eyes slightly away from the TV. "There's a camera in the window," I repeated, still walking towards it. At this time, my sister turned and opened the slotted blinds that covered the window's glass. With the blinds open, it was clear I was right. There, on a pole, was a small black camera, panning back and forth, taping the entirety of the room. As soon as my sister saw this, she screamed, which caused me to start screaming as well. We ran down the steps to my dad, who was watching TV on the couch. "Dad, there's a camera in the window!" we screamed, pointing to the side of the house. He reacted immediately, taking a wooden walking stick, the only available weapon, and ran outside to the side of the house. My sister fell to the floor, and I was comforting her. By this time, my mom had woken up and came out into the hallway. "What? Did you guys see a mouse or something?" she asked, as mice are her worst fear. I told her no, and to call 911, and quickly explained what had happened. My dad never saw anyone outside. The cops came and searched the nearby lawns and properties, but never found anyone. We never found out who it was. We know they had to be in our neighbor's yard, with the pole and the camera, as we had a dog who would have been barking if there was a person in our yard. We searched for footprints but found nothing either. Was it our neighbor's creepy son? Was it my sister's ex-boyfriend? Was it the first time or just one of many? Where is that video of my sleeping sister and 13-year-old me in a towel? I'll never know. If only I had looked down before my sister started screaming. It took a long time for me and my sister to sleep in our own rooms again. My mom bought blackout curtains for every window in the house, and to this day, I still feel uncomfortable with bare windows at night. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. That sort of stuff really helps me out with the audience engagement and really helps my videos get out to a lot more people. So hopefully we can get to that 1 million one day. Help me out, guys. That'd be great. Once again, starting this week on the second channel, we're going to be doing some true crime stuff, probably twice a week if I feel in the mood for it, and feel like doing all the research required. Those will be on Wednesdays/Thursdays and Saturdays/Sundays probably. So look forward to that if you're interested. There's a link to my second channel in the description. The name is Mr. Blue Sky, so keep an eye out for that. If you guys feel like contacting me for any reason, links to all of my social media will be in the description below, including my Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail accounts. Send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please make sure that it has proper grammar, and try to include as much detail as possible so it's long enough for me to include in a video. Also, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, if it has one, what type of story it is, if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you guys are curious about the art used in this video, links to my artist, Alan, will be in the description below. He does a lot of horror art stuff, and he's really good at it. He also does commissions, so if you guys have any projects you want to work on or something, please be sure to check him out. He can probably get you something really good. As usual, links to the music used in the video will be in the description below in the order which it appears. I think that's pretty much all for now, guys, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.